Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to the Week 5 edition of the Establish the Run First Look Show. I'm your host, Gary Hartman, here with you on this beautiful New York City Tuesday morning to go rapid fire first look at the Week 5 upcoming slate. Couple things. Crazy that we are already going to be over a quarter of the way through the regular season. It is insane. We're in October. Just nuts how fast the regular season flies once we get going. And on that note, we are into bye weeks. So we have a smaller slate here for the first time all season. We have a 10-game main slate. We have 4 bye week teams. We still have a London game plus all of our primetime games. That leaves us with 10 games. Just for context, the teams that are off the slate on buys this week, we have the Browns, the Chargers, the Seahawks, and the Buccaneers. Some firepower there from a DFS perspective, certainly. The Chargers have been one that we've been picking on quite a bit. And then Thursday night, we have the barn burner that is the Chicago Bears and Washington Commanders, so no Bears or Commanders on this slate. Sunday morning, Jags back-to-back in London, this time facing the Buffalo Bills. Much tougher matchup there. But more importantly for DFS, no Josh Allen, no Stephon Diggs, nothing from the Bills or Jaguars. Sunday night, really fun. Maybe the cream of the NFC right there with the Eagles, 49ers, and Cowboys on Sunday night. So no Christian McCaffrey as well on this slate. And then Monday night is Packers and Raiders. So it leaves a lot of our top tier skill position players off the slate. We'll talk about that as we go, but no Christian McCaffrey. So we'll see if Saquon Barkley plays. Potentially our most expensive running back is under $8K, right? We do still have Jefferson and Tyreek Hill on the slate. That's kind of the state of receiver. But, no Devontae Adams, no Stephon Diggs, no CeeDee Lamb. So certainly a possibility that ownership condenses around certain expensive plays, even more than we've seen in recent weeks. And, bye weeks allow for us to make our player pools a little bit smaller, keep combinations down a little bit. And we'll dive into all of that. But before we go player by player, the other thing I want to talk on is game environment. Talked last week how, hey, there was that Bills-Dolphins game that was 53.5. Certainly was heard from a DFS perspective. This week, though, on paper, it doesn't seem like any of these games are super fast or necessarily incredible. We do, for the first time, at least since week 1, I know we didn't do a week 1 video, we do have 2 games with a 50-point game total or higher on the same slate and a 49.5. So 53.5 is Chiefs-Vikings at 4 o'clock. Now, the differences between these games and the 50s that we've had the last couple weeks is these are 4 to 6 point spreads. So the Chiefs-Vikings is a 53.5, obviously a huge spread in the Dome in Minnesota. Minnesota are 5.5 point home dogs to the Chiefs. And then the next is the 50.5, also at 4 o'clock, is the Eagles-Rams. The Eagles traveling west. Rams have shown an ability to put up points. The Eagles are 4-point road favorites there. So 2 4 o'clock games with a 50 or more over under. And then also the other one that's close, amazingly, after last night's performance, is the Giants at Dolphins. That's a 49.5. And not surprisingly at all, as we kind of jump into team totals, that's all on the back of Miami, who has the highest team total of the week at 30.5. Anytime you see a team with a total with a 30-point or more total, you don't ignore it. Even as 10.5 point favorites, they're coming off that loss to Buffalo. Wouldn't be surprised to see them try to reestablish some offensive dominance here at home against a lowly New York Giants team. The Chiefs are 29.5. Eagles and Lions. Lions are home also for a track meet, or at the Coors Field of football in Ford Field with a 27.5 for them and the Eagles. So those are your main 4 teams that have high team totals. Other than that, it's a bunch of just mediocre 20 to 22 point team totals, low 40s to mid 40s game environments. All that being said, let's dive into quarterback. It was another week in which spending down a quarterback could have been optimal for you. Josh Dobbs, I think, ended up actually being the optimal quarterback. We started talking about how Justin Fields looked really good last week at 6,500. He was certainly viable and was optimal for most of the day. I haven't gotten a chance to see how tight saving salary is on this slate. But that's something with modern day DFS, is that salary saving that you need at quarterback is often what you might need, especially when a lot of these guys in the 5-6K range do have the ability to score low to mid 20s points. Still, though, I always say When a player's going to get close to 40 or high 30s, you probably need that despite the salary. And our top 2 quarterbacks this week are also, or top most expensive quarterbacks, probably our highest ceiling quarterbacks, are also in the highest game totals of the week. I mentioned that 53.5 for KC, Minnesota. I mentioned the 50.5 for Philly and the Rams. And those are where you have Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. So both guys on the road, certainly, but we know teams have just lit up. Minnesota still waiting on a massive ceiling game from Mahomes this year. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes this week. They're coming off that rough Sunday night game against the Jets in which they almost lost to Zach Wilson. Probably his worst game that you've seen in a long time. You see his QB rating only 63.6 there. If there's ever a week for him to get back over that 30-point hump, it seems like it's this week. So no issues with Mahomes if you can afford it. Jalen Hurts as well, has also cracked that 30-point mark, but he's trending in the right direction. 27 points in Washington, obviously always a threat for the tush push and those rushing touchdowns. Has carried the ball between 9 and 12 times in each of his first 4 contests this year. There's a reason he was in the running for overall QB1. I like this spot just fine for Hurts as well. Moving down from there, Lamar looks maybe the best he's looked in years. You look at these last 2 games, 29.14 DraftKings points. In what was really a blowout win in Cleveland, and 32 in week 3. He's using his legs a lot, right? 2 rushing touchdowns in each of the last 2 weeks. And we know he has the ability to throw the ball. Todd Monken still wants this to be a throw-heavy team. We'll see if he can get back Odell Beckham and or Rashad Bateman this week. But this is against a Pittsburgh team that, yes, of course, it's always different in Baltimore Steelers. And it's possible this game just plays ugly and low scoring. That's always in the range of outcomes. This is a Steelers team that just got shredded by C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans. And let's give Stroud his props. He's been incredible. But Lamar Jackson should be able to do some damage there as well. Do I know 3 great weeks in a row are on the table for Lamar in division on the road? No, but it's not something I would rule out of my tournaments. Tua gets the Giants. I don't know what to say about the Giants. It's about as bad as it possibly could have been. I'd say most of it is on the majority of the offensive line on the other side, but it's not like they've been able to stop that much defensively as well. I don't think they can stop this Dolphins team. So he's been an every other week kind of guy so far. If you look at those first 4 weeks, 32 points, then 13 points, 31 points, then 14 points. If there's a pattern trending here, it would be on the side of a 30-plus point game, plus at home here against a Giants team that doesn't scare you. Tua is definitely in play. I mentioned they have the highest team total of the week. Anthony Richardson, I mentioned last week, he's officially eclipsed anytime he's on a slate. You're considering him, and you get the Titans. Now, the difference here is, obviously Richardson's ceiling outcomes come as a dual threat with his legs, and the Titans are good against the run. But again, they are not good against the pass, despite what we saw out of the Bengals last week, who are just its own mess right now. They are at home against a Titans team that you've been able to throw on. Steichen has shown no hesitancy letting a Rich sit back in the pocket and rip it, right? 25 attempts in week 4, 37, we recall, in week 1. And, he's still going to have the ability around the goal line. He's now priced up to where he should be at $7K. But this is a good Anthony Richardson spot. Certainly feel free to use him, with no concerns whatsoever. Cousins, I'm curious how ownership shakes out here between Cousins and Mahomes. Obviously, you get the, $1,300 savings on Kirk Cousins. Finally coming off his 1 down week of the season against Carolina. They didn't have to do that much in that game. Ended up being a little bit slower. Got off to a tough start there as well with that pick 6. But, at home against KC, if this game turns into a track meet, you're going to want plenty of Kirk Cousins. So, again, it seems like you can really make a case for every single quarterback on the slate so far. Makes it a tough start to the week. Jared Goff, Carolina's defense certainly better than I think maybe people give them credit for. We just saw that they were able to kind of hold that Vikings offense in check last week, but this game's in Detroit. Goff's coming off the long rest week, waiting on a huge game out of Goff as well. Again, I don't love those pure pocket passers when they're in the mid 6K, but he's certainly going to be in play for you for a 300-yard plus 3 touchdown game, kind of similar to what he did in week 2. And then going down from there, this is going to be the cheapest you'll probably ever see Joe Burrow. But, man, it just doesn't look right? This whole Bengals team just doesn't look right. If you're playing in the lottos, I would still take some shots because just who knows when a switch flips. We know the firepower and talent they have on that offense. This is not a matchup that scares you. In Arizona, but it is a scary, scary click right now, is Joe Burrow and all these Bengals. It's really been unfortunate to see. CJ Stroud, I think clear rookie of the year favorite at this point. Unbelievable numbers that he's putting up. The problem is he is a pure pocket passer. I think these 302s are just right there in the range. This is in Atlanta. Atlanta kind of keeps these pace down. Their defense is solid. And I just don't know if these 30-point games are in the bag on the road here. And now that he's crossed 6K, he's just an play to me. When he was a real discount option, I was more into it. I'm going to go back to Daniel Jones, which is insane considering how bad that offensive line is. But you look in that week 2, 34 points. We know he was optimal many times last year. He's a true dual threat. They'll throw everything against the wall here. Still going to have to throw the ball by default. And he's literally $200 cheaper than CJ Stroud in a 49.5 game environment, in which they should have to pay from behind. I don't like it. The floor is really low with this offensive line, but certainly going to be in play for you at only 5.8. Curious what his ownership looks like throughout the week, or if the field is just super scared off of all things Giants. Not that interested in Russell Wilson against the Jets. Stafford on the other side of the Eagles game will be in play for you, as well as straight leverage, and he's really cheap too, so that's interesting. Dobbs, I mentioned, was the optimal at 23.4 points at only 5K. They only raised him $200. Still probably a little bit too cute for me with all those other ceiling cases on this slate. I don't think I'm going to any of these other guys down there. But as you can see now that we're 11 minutes into this video, most quarterbacks are going to be in play for you this week. So we'll be breaking it down throughout the week at ETR. I mentioned no CMC on this slate. That leaves Saquon Barkley potentially as our highest priced running back. I'd be a little scared of that in negative game script coming off a high ankle on the road at 8,100. Curious what his ownership would end up being like. I do think he's going to try to play next week. Bijan was our cover boy for sure of this video, and he's been excellent to start the season. Only one game with a yards per carry under 5.5, and that was that week 3 in Detroit. Still splitting carries with Algier, and his rushing attempts haven't even been that high, 14 last week, but so consistently getting 5 to 6 targets through the air, just talent. And then the matchup here at home against Houston, and he's starting to separate a little bit. Algier, I believe, only saw 8 touches this past week, so I really like Bijan a lot, and especially with no Christian McCaffrey, you might be able to get up there in salary. The 7.7 doesn't scare you. He's kind of been consistently right around that range, so he makes a ton of sense. We finally saw Derrick Henry have a Derrick Henry game. Starting to think, was Derrick Henry dust? Is he done? Not only does he rush for 122 and a rushing touchdown, but he also threw one in. Good to see out of Derrick Henry. I'm still a little bit scared. They boost him right back up to mid 7s after being at 7K in week 4. They're on the road in Indianapolis. I think he's fine. I think he should be in your tournament pools, but I don't know if we're getting those dominant Derrick Henry games of old where we're getting like 35, 40 points. 27.38 though. It's pretty good for Derrick Henry. You take that if you can get that again. Kieran Williams, they price all the way up. Did suffer a bruised hip this past week, but man, the role is as good as it gets in fantasy football. And they even reduced it a little bit this week, and he still put up 30 DraftKings points. He's going to get all the goal line work, has some work through the air. Touchdown equity is there. It's a tough matchup against Philadelphia, and they raised him all the way up to 5th highest, 6th highest running back. Curious where his ownership comes in. I don't like him nearly as much this week. I really don't, but I certainly can't ignore it with that role. David Montgomery, another guy with an amazing role. The Lions can't help themselves. They draft DeAndre Swift. They draft Jahmyr Gibbs, 12th overall. They draft Jahmyr Gibbs, and they don't give this guy real work outside of some pass game stuff. Meanwhile, David Montgomery, not necessarily efficient, but absolutely gets all the goal line work. Jamal Williams type style of last year, and is who the coaching staff trusts. So if they have these games in tow, 3.8 yards a carry, 4.2 yards a carry, but carried the ball 32 times, found the end zone 3 times. That's mid 6K range, probably right. This is not a matchup that I like nearly as much against Carolina, and now he's priced up, but still these games are in the range of outcomes with 3 potential touchdowns and 30 plus 34 total touches. I do like the spot for sure. Mix in again. It's really hard to recommend anyone on the Bengals here, but it's a good matchup against the Cardinals. I think that's for sure. Kamara really took back bell cow work right away, and 13 catches on 14 targets for 33 yards. This is a full point DraftKings to PPR, baby. We don't really care about 33 yards. We'll take the 13 catches for sure. Was happy to see him kind of come back and get that bell cow roll. This is spot on the road in New England. but New England's been susceptible to give up some run stuff this year. I know Mostert had a big game against them. Yeah, I think it's hard. Kenneth Walker looked pretty good on the ground against the Giants yesterday. But at this point, Mostert obviously was maybe the fantasy MVP or one of them for the first 3 weeks. And then boom, Devon Achane. Another price up around the same. Achane's big play equity, touchdown equity is massive. I do think if this game, Dolphins 10.5-point favorites, likely they run the game out with Mostert if it needs to be that way. But Achane and Mostert both in that low 6K range seems efficient to me. DeAndre Swift also, since that big week 2 performance, has just grabbed this role by the horns. First performance, but still found the end zone, still found 17 points. I think the floor is really high here on DeAndre Swift. I've been saying it all year. The Rams do not have much talent outside of Aaron Donald on that defense. So no issues with Swift in what is looking like one of the better game environments of the week. I mentioned the aforementioned Gibbs. I still will keep taking shots there in tournaments, right? Because talent's there. If they get into a game script where they're not necessarily up big the whole time, or it is up pace a little bit. I think that, we saw those 9 targets in week 2. I think those types of games are in the range of outcomes for sure. But, haven't seen the ceiling at all. We know that they trust David Montgomery a ton. It's not the most comfortable click, but he's at least priced down now to sub 6K. This might be our last Zach Moss week, but this is a tough matchup against Tennessee. Sounds like Jonathan Taylor is going to come back next week. James Conner against the Bengals still has a great role. She'll make your pool at only 5,800. He's priced more appropriately. Madison did get eaten into by Cam Akers in the second half, but if you actually look at efficiency stuff over the last 2 weeks on Madison, yards from carry trending in the right direction. I still think this is the guy that the organization paid. They probably trust him more. Matchup with KC where that has a high over under. There's some touchdown equity here. He should be in your player pool. Pacheco, man, as everyone was saying all week, runs as if the ground is mad at him. 5,700. That 28 points is going to be what you need to win tournaments often. And that's what he just did against the Jets on the road. So I don't see why I wouldn't be able to do it in Minnesota as well. From there, Ramondre, been a real fantasy disappointment, just not looking like the same electric back that he was last year. But, at home against New Orleans, it's fine. I'm not really recommending any Steelers running back, but if I were to take one, it would be Jaylen Warren. Breece Hall gets a matchup with the Broncos here. If Zach Wilson is able to show an ability, once again, to build on that performance in KC, this is a great matchup. The Broncos, if you look at the DVOA stuff, there's been some numbers going around sports Twitter and football Twitter over the last couple of days about how historically bad that Broncos defense has been up until this point. Then Breece Hall is the guy with a massive ceiling that should be able to take advantage of that. So no issues. Khalil Herbert just dominated that Broncos run defense. He's only 5,400 too. So it's a salary saving piece. It's a piece that I can get into for sure. Matt Breida would be an option for you if Saquon Barkley is out once again. I guess Dalvin Cook in that same vein as Breece Hall, but he looks completely washed to me. I'm not going there personally. Let's see what happens with Javonte Williams, but Jaleel McLaughlin passes the eye test in every way. I'd imagine if Javonte is hurt or limited, McLaughlin would get the majority of the chances over Pirine. Maybe Pirine is a little bit more of that veteran trust to him. But I like McLaughlin as a flyer for sure at only 5K. And that's kind of it on the running back front. You can take a shot on Gus Edwards. We'll see if Justice Hill is available. Receiver side, also our top 3 receiving options, really, with Kupp still out on the shelf. So Jefferson, Tyreek, and A.J. Brown, all, again, your 3 highest team total or game total environments of the week. So Justin Jefferson in Kansas City. We know that he is going to be in play. And he finally had a week where he didn't eclipse 100 yards. But what did he do? He found the end zone twice. So 9,400, they lower him only $200 from last week. I think he's going to be very popular this week with no Christian McCaffrey on the slate, no CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, some of these big name guys. They lower him $200. You could probably find the salary with some saving if you go at quarterback, etc. So I think Jefferson's going to be really popular this week, but does likely have the highest ceiling alongside Tyreek Hill of all these receivers on the slate. Tyreek Hill also has been an every other week guy, and I mentioned similar to Tua Tagovailoa. Seems like this will be a week that he can get. I do not believe in any of the Giants' cornerbacks' abilities to slow down Tyreek Hill at home, 9K. We know the ceiling is literally 50 points. I wouldn't be messing around. Tyreek Hill would be a big part of my GPP portfolio. Another guy that'll be quite popular, I'm sure. A.J. Brown coming off 2 massive weeks in a row, and his target share has been just absolutely insane the last 2 weeks. 9 catches on 13 to 14 targets in each of those 2 weeks. 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Massive week for, on the road, traveling west against the Rams. Not as good of a spot, but no reason why I can't keep it going. My only argument against it is if they kind of go, hey, let's get Devonta Smith involved. We need a big Devonta Smith week. Let's keep everyone happy. But big game environment, both these guys are definitely going to be solid options for you. Again, really hard to Jamar Chase, I was very into last week, and he still got to 14 points, 9 targets, 7 of 73. I like what we saw to week 3 out of him, and that's kind of the argument for A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith was against that Rams team. It ended up going under, and he still had his 15 targets. So I think that in the matchup like this against Arizona, where they just are desperate for a win in every way, hey, get the ball in your best player's hands, even if Burrow's not right, low A-dot stuff. I'm going to be taking those shots again, but the downside is there this year with Jamar Chase in a way that maybe we didn't think was possible before. Amon-Ra at home is always going to be good. 7,800, totally fine. Puka, they have now priced him all the way up, 6,700 to 7,700. That's right, though, right? He's on pace to break all these records, another 9 for 163 and a touchdown. Been over 30 points in 2 of his 4 games, 25 in week 1. Only one down-ish performance is against Philly. Philly's given up big points through the air throughout this year. I mean, they are not the same defense they were last year. We just saw Washington put up 30-plus points against them. Puka is going to get his points. At 77, very curious where Steelers ownership comes in. I don't like him as much. Probably want him in correlation, but we know the ceiling's there for sure on Puka Nacua. Jalen Waddle has been one of the biggest disappointments in fantasy so far this year. Looks like a clear number 2 instead of maybe that 1B that we thought he was with Tyreek Hill. He's battled injuries, hasn't eclipsed 12 points, hasn't eclipsed 6 targets, and they haven't really lowered his price for you. So what is that going to mean? It's a pure contrarian play, which I don't mind going to in a good matchup as well. Going down from there, Chris Olave, non-existent this week. Only 6 targets, 4 yards. I don't know if Derek Carr was right. I don't think he was. Now they're going on the road to New England. I'm not that into the Saints spot this week. T. Higgins looks like he's going to be out for a period of time with this fractured rib. So that's going to create some value on the secondary and tertiary Bengals receivers like Tyler Boyd. Read cheap wide receiver volume for anything on that front, but it's kind of another feather in Jamar Chase's cap. More defensive attention, but more target share for him as well. Michael Pittman still has a great role and was down this week. Now you get had a down week. Now you get a great matchup with Tennessee. Again, I think those A-Rich Pittman stacks are going to be very much in play for you. For sure, Jerry Jeudy's complaining on Twitter despite a win that they're not involved enough, and you can't blame the guy. They have not been involved very much. It's a tough matchup with the Jets on the passing game. Not that interested. Garrett Wilson, I'm interested in though. I mean, if we're going to get Zach Wilson to look even decent, 14 targets, only 6K, all the way priced down from 6,700 against the Broncos. Like, this seems really good. I'm curious how much ownership condenses around these Jets in the spot. Really curious, because are people going to overreact to one good game out of Zach Wilson's whole entire career? If so, Garrett Wilson seems pretty good. D-Hop on the other side of that Tennessee stuff also is in a good spot. No ceiling games there yet, but the guy still demands targets, only 5,700. That's the kind of price that I can get my head around. Nico Collins, on the other hand, still very underpriced. We mentioned they kind of boost up Puka Nacua all the way to 7,700. Nico's a guy that's been optimal twice. 2 massive 30-plus point games. This is in Atlanta, in the Dome. Not the best matchup in the world, but Stroud making these guys super viable. I don't know if he does it 2 weeks in a row. Not as great of a spot, but 5,600 is too cheap for the ceiling Nico Collins has right now. Zay will be in play for you if it's whether, especially if those guys are out again. Was a little bit disappointing with no Beckham and Bateman this past week, but that was a tough matchup in Cleveland. Pittsburgh, just mentioned Nico Collins and what he was able to do to that team. Going down from there, take a look at cheap wide receiver volume for any of these answers. Addison, KJ Osborne types will be pivots for you in that great game environment, and et cetera. So definitely we'll have cheap wide receiver volume updated for you by Thursday afternoon. Tight end Travis Kelce is on the slate. I think a lot of people are going to go there. Highest game total of the week. Chiefs have the second highest team total at 29.5 in Minnesota. Only 7,600, which, I mean, we haven't seen a massive ceiling. I mean, all the Taylor Swift talk again. A massive Travis Kelce game's coming. I'm talking like 25 to 30 points. It's coming, and I would not at all be surprised if it's this week. So with some of those big names off the slate, with running back being relatively cheap or mid-tier again, I would imagine Kelsey's going to be popular. And on the other side, I think Hawkinson should be too. We saw the Jets target those tight ends coming off a down week, but up until last week, he was getting massive target share. They paid him this offseason, 6,500. So you get the savings on Kelce. I want one of those 2 tight ends in a lot of lineups this week. So I think, you have a very clear top tier at Kelsey and Hawkinson. Andrews, we had a vintage game. I feel like the vintage Mark Andrews games are 5 for 80 and 2 touchdowns. I just feel like he's had a ton of those games throughout his career with Lamar Jackson, and it was exactly what we got in week 4. Goes into Pittsburgh here again. I'm curious to see what kind of adjustments Pittsburgh makes after that super embarrassing loss to Houston. Ravens-Steelers games are kind of their own beast, so Price is right at 55. Don't like him as much as those 2 guys ahead of him. And I really want to be recommending Darren Waller. He's been super disappointing. I don't even know if it's his fault. Yes, he's 31. This DraftKings website says maybe he's lost a step, or maybe the Giants just have 0 time to get the ball out, and it's really pathetic about how bad this offense is. Either way, it's a little bit of a tough click right now. I think, I want to maybe on bringbacks with Dolphin stuff. If you want to go that route, the matchup does not scare you. So I think that's, in his favor. And I think the ceiling is still there as well. Laporte has been the cream of the rookie tight end crop this year. If you're going Goff stuff, I would boost him there. And then you get a big step down to the mid 4Ks. Still waiting on a big Goddard game. I like him as well here. Hasn't even eclipsed 10 at DraftKings points yet, but target share has been okay. And eventually he's going to have a big game is Dallas Goedert, and he's really cheap. So you can kind of get exposure to that game at only 4,200. After that, I'd rather spend down at quarterback. I mean, Kyle Pitts all the way down to 3,300 against a Houston team. That's kind of crazy. And I'm interested in spending down at tight end from there. Okay, that's my rambling for week 5. It's an interesting slate. Really curious to see how ownership condenses around this one. Can be a little bit ugly. I think there'll be some surprises this week. Buys, things start to change up a little bit on the main slate. So we'll be here all week for you to talk it through. Team by team pods later today. And keep an eye on everything we have going on at Establish the Run. If you aren't subscribed, please go over to establishthерun.com. Check it out. We have crushed projections the last couple weeks, and we're hoping to keep it going. I hope the first quarter of the season has been fruitful for you all. And if not, we're forward-looking only over here. Keep it going. Good luck in week 5. I will see you next week. Take care, everybody.